All right, Councilmember Brooks, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
The first thing I'd like to ask you about, what is it like to be in the minority on city council? And what exactly does that mean?
What is it like? I think that's kind of like twofold for me. Like one, it's like being in the minority, I really don't have anyone to caucus with. I had to create a pseudo caucus, more of a progressive caucus, as opposed to just being a Democrat. Like I didn't have a party to kind of bounce ideas off and policy. So that was one. But I think being in the minority, it also gives me like a level of freedom to be able to move on policy and legislation, you know, how I choose. Like it's really all of our stuff, all our work is centered around our constituency and the progressive base that got me elected. So we're able, you know, and it's almost like a gift and a curse. It's, we have to work harder to build allies around some issues, and then other issues, you just kind of learn your colleagues and you know who you can go to for support depending on what it is. So it's been like a mixed bag of kind of getting to know and understand the council body, as well as learning how, you know, council works and creating a space for myself that has never been there before, and gaining respect along the way. I think most of it was about earning the respect of my colleagues. And that's how we're able to get things done. Because we don't have to agree. We just need to respect each other enough to, you know, to disagree a lot of times. So
Yeah. So the fall session is set to begin in a couple of weeks. What are your top priorities when council gets started again?
Well, this when we come back, we're planning to introduce protection for abortion access for those who are traveling to seek abortions. And we're doing that along with Planned Parenthood, ACLU, Abortion Liberation Fund, New Voices Reproductive, Assets Matters, women, a bunch of Women Against Abuse, CHOP, and my colleague, Councilmember Gim. We been considering this legislation as well around shield laws for abortion providers who say that, I'm sorry, wait. The shield laws are to protect abortion providers from taking clients from out of state. We want to make sure that people have the right to come do that in Pennsylvania. And there are a couple of us, a package of bills that we looked at that was just introduced in Pittsburgh. And we're working on mirroring some of that here in Philadelphia. And that's something we plan on doing when we come back in the fall. And then we've been ongoing with our wealth tax. We have a hearing scheduled for September 21st in City Council chambers. And, you know, it would tax intangible personal property like stocks and bonds at a rate of 4%, which is $4 on every thousand. And it's anticipated that we could raise over $2 million a year with this. And this is, you know, money we see as, you know, everyone paying their fair share. And part of paying their fair share means make sure that we're able to get money back into city's funds to be able to, you know, support the programs that we have been advocating forever, whether it's Parks and Rec, public transit, you know, safe public transit systems, as well as we talked about pools. All of them weren't open this summer. So this is like a long-term strategy to gain more revenue for city services and actually, you know, reinvest back in Black and brown neighborhoods, because we've seen a divestment in those neighborhoods and we haven't seen a return not even back to prior COVID dollars. So that's what the wealth tax kind of encompasses, and we're looking forward to that hearing. And I'm still working with this community gardens. We know that, you know, US Bank has liens on about 100 parcels of land throughout the city. And we still continue to work with the administration and council president and community organizers and the gardeners and US Bank to find a permanent solution to all these bank liens, because the reality is, like, these folks have been tending to this land for generations. And we're trying to make sure that, in neighborhoods that are, highly gentrified or becoming highly gentrified, that the neighbors are able to protect the property they have tended to over years. And keep in mind, this is properties that were blighted and abandoned, and the neighbors took it upon themselves to revitalize it. And we want to make sure that they can, still have access to that land. So it's been an ongoing fight. We talked about it a lot during the budget season, and we're still in negotiations around that. And finally, seniors in housing. We realized that, we've been doing the senior in housing series since I started in council. And we're going to continue to have this seniors in housing series that we've been working on, because we realize that, our seniors are some of our most vulnerable population. And if we don't do anything to preserve the current housing crisis that they're in, we're doing a disservice to our city. And one other thing I almost forgot was our rent control. I introduced the hearing on rent control, was the first thing I introduced in council. However, we have not had a public hearing as of yet. So we're looking to reactivate that work around rent stabilization sometimes in the fall or the spring. With the pandemic underway, it's been really hard to get the community groups and everyone together to have a solid hearing. So we're planning on reactivating that, because we realize that, rents are increasing regularly. Like, we have calls every day in our office about, people being displaced because of increase in rent. And we need to do something to, ensure our citizens here in Philadelphia.
A lot of the things you just mentioned are things that would help decrease the level of poverty in the city. Attacking different areas of poverty. Do you think in general, council is going to push more anti-poverty programs this fall? And if so, what do you think they might look like, in addition to what you just mentioned?
I can't speak for what council will do as a whole. I am very clear on my priorities and the things that are most important to me, as well as to my constituency and what we're hearing. And I'm certain that my colleagues will be moving on the same page. A lot of the things that we spoke about, we have some level of support from my council colleagues, but I'm not really clear on what they plan on introducing at this time.
Okay. I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, and thank you so much, council member, for giving us your time.
You're welcome.
My question centers around the word progressive. I interviewed the executive director for Netroots Nation last week, and I asked him the question I'm about to ask you now. When you talk to folks in most communities of color about progressives and about progressivism, while they're more than happy to sign on to progressive ideas, they're not real fond of progressives themselves, because there is a perception of a bit of racism and anti-Semitism within the progressive movement. How has Philadelphia managed to avoid that? And if it hasn't, what's being done to kind of clear that out?
That's a really good question, Denise. I see myself as a progressive. I haven't experienced anti-Semitism and those things, particularly in the progressive spaces that I came up through. I came up through community organizing and activism. Those organizations that I organize with are groups that kind of help me understand the needs of my community. Not that I didn't know what the needs were, I really didn't know how to organize to get the things done. So for me, aligning with the progressive movement was more about aligning with folks that were showing me, my neighbors, and other folks how to organize to get our needs met. Whether it was around schools, whether it was around neighborhoods against the power plant. There's so many different things that I've organized around that came out of the progressive movement. So for me, I haven't seen that level. I can't speak to anti-Semitism or racism, but in that case, it's racism everywhere. And when we start talking about politics in general, it's a level of elitism and classism that floats throughout all politics that no one talks about that as well. So I don't know how to say we have been able to escape it here in Philadelphia. I just know that there are other folks like me where I'm from with my same experiences, meaning, low, moderate income folks, impacted folks, also college educated folks that believe that, the city that we live in can be so much better. And we gravitate around things that are beyond the status quo. So the things that, one perfect example, during the pandemic, most of the things in my lifetime of organizing that they said could not happen. And during my organizing, it was a waste of time. And I was a crazy person for fighting for these things happened. Just like that. Every child has a computer in school. That was one of the first things I organized around when I first started organizing, making sure kids have access to internet, right? High-speed internet discounted to free. They said that was impossible. So all of these things for me came out of the progressive movement. And people can dispute that, but I know for me, it has given me a home, a political home for my ideology, for my values, and a place for me to grow. Keep in mind, I had no idea that I would be in politics now. My path to politics came solely out of fighting for the things that my neighbors in my community wanted. And I found those things to be grounded in progressive movement. So now that people are painting progressive to be a bad word, I still embrace it because those are the values that brought me this, out of, my community and got me activated. And I will continue to fight around those values as we move forward. So I try, like they said, I'm the black face of the progressives, whatever that means. I know a lot of black progressives. So I try not to engage in these anti-progressive conversations because right now I feel like my values are the values of the people. It doesn't have to have a label. It has to be rooted in the things that our communities need.
Okay. Now, as someone who started out being an activist in terms of the city schools, right now they're about to open, but there's short of teachers and there's other issues that are going on. Are you paying attention to those? And so what things are you saying to your fellow council members about what council can do to help with these issues?
I mean, we realized that we're approaching a teacher shortage for years. So we have been, as soon as I came into office, we've been advocating for ways for the school district to do general recruitment because it's not just short teaching staff, they're short staff overall. And we realize this is a national crisis. One of the main things we need to pay teachers more, but that's not a decision that city council makes. We do offer funding to the school district minimal, but we don't have the ultimate decision to determine how that is exactly done. That is a school board decision as well as the superintendent.
Now, Larry asked you about being a part of the minority in council and the fact that the minorities consist basically of you and two Republicans who probably don't even talk to each other all that much, if we're honest with ourselves. How do you create coalitions? Because you mentioned that you have to kind of make your own coalitions. How do you create those within council?
I create those because I'm an excellent organizer. I have, one of the things, one of my colleagues, that you mentioned, one of the Republican colleagues said I was the most collaborative person that he's ever worked with. Now, keep in mind, he's been in council most of my life. So to me, that was a big compliment. I don't mind reaching across the aisle, reaching across interests and talking to everyone about any piece of legislation that we're moving. So when we even when we did paid sick leave, we met with the folks who were fighting us tooth and nail for it not to pass. Because in order for you to have a clear understanding and to get to a win, you need to know, what the opposition is. So for me, I think that's how I build coalitions. Folks see me as a person that I'll listen, I'll take it in consideration. I do have my bottom line on, when you come down to a negotiation, but the fact that I'm willing to listen and make sure that, every part of this conversation is heard. I felt like when I first started, they tried to give me a hard way to go, saying I didn't talk to the opposition, but now we go out of our way to speak to everyone. So I already know what your problem is with this bill, but I need you to get me to a win. So you don't have to agree on all of it, but what can you agree on? Without compromising the needs of the other folks on the other end. And I think I've done an excellent job, especially when we talk about paid sick leave, each iteration of it, which was very hard. We talk about the housing work that we've done. We talked about those probably were the hardest. I think the paid sick leave and Emergency Housing Protection Act. We even got Alan Dowd to sign off on that. That's a win for me. If you can get someone who is a landlord, a huge landlord in the city, to agree on, some fair housing stuff, that's a win. And I accredit that to both myself and my team taking a restorative approach to getting things done. I don't take a no, I can take not right now. And let's figure out how we can get to a win, because it doesn't have to be a yes and no. We need a win. We need a win for the people. And I think that's the approach my team takes, and that's how we're able to build coalitions, across issues.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Larry McGlynn, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPN.
Thank you, Denise. Councilmember, I just have 2 questions left for you. What should the city do with its budget surplus?
Oh, so many other things. Like, we realize that, Parks and Recs aren't still funded up to full capacity. We need to make sure we have young folks that have things to do for out of school time program, which is necessary, especially with the gun violence crisis that we have in the city. If we have what they say, the idle mind is the devil's workshop. So if we don't have anything for young people to do, that's one thing. We can, we did this commercial corridor cleanup and more street cleanup and, towards sanitation, and make sure our city is clean and not just in places where people visit. I'm talking about in every neighborhood. We need to make sure that, trash is collected. If we do something around blight, making sure we're invested in, cleaning out vacant lots and making sure abandoned properties are boarded up and, so people aren't able to get into it and don't look bad. So many homeless services, like we can definitely do more investment in the homeless services. Eviction protection, we need to make sure people are able to stay in home. Rental assistance, there are a list of things. We're a city that's a poor city, so there are a lot of city services we can invest in. I think that we just need to have vision, and I think if we have vision, we'll clearly be able to spend whatever surplus we have in a way to move our city towards, the city of our dreams. And one of the things I didn't talk about, when we talk about community safety, you didn't bring this up, but it just popped in my mind. When we talk about emergency first aid responders, when we have the mental health professionals responding to mental health crises, that isn't fully funded. And that's another program that we could afford to fully, if we had the money, we could fully fund to see some real results here in our city.
And whether we like it or not, we are officially or unofficially, depending on how you look at it, in the 2023 mayoral election. What qualities are you looking for in a new mayor?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. What qualities? Strong leadership, strong vision, intentionality, like a plan for the city, a long-term plan for the city, not just for tomorrow, but what is it going to look like in 8 years? I think when we think about, where we are right now as a city, certain things our mayor could not predict, but it goes back to what I said. All of the things that I organized around my whole lifetime, all of a sudden became available to city residents during the pandemic. And we had money to pay for it. All of it wasn't just federal funds. We were able to pull money out from our city funds to take care of some of the things that we paid for. And I think if we have a mayor with vision, they'll be able to create a vision for our city 8-10 years down the line to hopefully bring us out of the largest, poorest city in the country, to do something around gun violence and to make sure our city is back on its feet.
Councilmember Kendra Brooks, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.